Welcome to the penultimate Meta Monday, as the Warmachine season will come to a close after Lock and Load next weekend. Let's talk about the meta going into the event and then the event itself. My name is Ryan. I used to be good at Warmachine. Welcome to Spell Rack. I stepped away from Warmachine for about 7 or 8 years, and to come back and have Lock and Load reimagined and restarted by Steamforged Games is something that I'm very, very excited about. Lock and Load was the premier event started by Privateer Press, I believe in 2012, and it was the event they created that became the biggest in the space, maybe until the WTC was started. Lock and Load holds particular fond memories for me. Jason Flanzer was the gentleman that got me into the game. Jason Flanzer won Lock and Load 2012. That was my first Lock and Load. I got to watch him play in the finals. Lock and Load 2013, we had our Masters event that I'm highlighting here, an old news article from Privateer Press. I won that Masters in 2013. That was a 128 player event. Imagine a singles event that size these days. Obviously, that was, one of the highlights of my Warmachine career. Lock and Load drew players from around the world, though it was a singles event. I have very fond memories of playing against one Jamie Perkins in the Iron Gauntlet, Butcher 3 against Nemo 3. Jamie got me. And then the other is playing against James Morehouse from Australia. A handful of the Australians came up one year and participated in Lock and Load. So very excited to see this event back. Depending on how long you've been into Warmachine, I want folks to have an appreciation for this coming back and some excitement for what Steamforged Games can do with this event. I'm very excited to attend this year and to see it grow in future years. The other side of next weekend is Warfare Weekend, which Lock and Load is participating alongside. Historically, Warfare Weekend was Warmachine Weekend, and prior to Lock and Load, and maybe even alongside Lock and Load, was the biggest singles event in Warmachine. Warmachine Weekend was the end of the season. It had the invitational attached to it and was the event that everybody focused on. Carl ran the program, ran it very, very well for a number of years out of St. Louis. My understanding is that once it's become Warfare Weekend, the event, since been out of Carl's hands, the event has continued to go downhill pretty dramatically. And so I am a little bummed to see this once favorite event of mine in Warmachine Weekend to have become something that's kind of maligned and people uninterested in the invitational. I am hoping that Lock and Load participation with the event and their taking over of Warmachine will merge what was once two great events together in Warmachine Weekend and Lock and Load, and kind of restoring this event to its glory that I witnessed in Warmachine's heyday. I'm very excited for this weekend to see what the event holds, to see what Steamforged does with it. Very excited to turn a corner here as Warmachine is kind of coming back to life as a game. Bringing these events back to life is a big part of returning to the former glory days. All right, let's very quickly talk about the final meta as we go into the end of the season, this real final event. I know there will be small events outside of this, but this is the last real big event of the season. There's going to be a 3-person team tournament on Friday. Then there's going to be the last chance qualifier on Friday, and then there's going to be the invitational Saturday and Sunday, and that sort of ends the season. So we're going to Longshanks. I'm still looking at the last 3 months of data. Not many events in the last handful of weeks other than the WTC, because the WTC obviously takes up a lot of space with a lot of travel for players, taking them out of local events for multiple weeks generally. This is going to be a fairly diluted data set looking back the last 3 months. I am using the last 3 months though because it gives us the most clear picture of Old Umbry and what actually is the current meta. Looking at this last event. Real quick, this is not to say that there will not be events in December or later in November. Still look forward to local steamrollers. Grab your local players, get out there and play games. Things will be quieter as people look to the January update. One thing I'm going to try to pursue in my local meta is what's called a Who's the Boss event as a more fun way to close out the season. Who's the Boss, for those that are not familiar? You draft a full single list without a Warcaster, and then you show up to the event with your one list without your Warcaster, And what happens at a Who's the Boss event is you are randomly assigned a Warcaster or a Warlock to play with your list. So the community comes together to bring all the Warlocks and Warcasters that any and everybody owns. So you may not have all of them, but you'll get the majority of them if 8 people show up and have different factions. And then from there, you can randomize what Warcaster or Warlock you get in each round. I play Dusk. If I can have Sabrith in Dusk, it makes for a very interesting game. If I can get Maxim in Dusk, it makes for an interesting and very different game. Sparkhammer, I don't know, we'll see what happens. You do flip and flop Focus and Fury according to your rules to make sure everything works. Warjacks, War Beasts. It's just a fun time. Engage the community. Who's the Boss? Really good thing to run. All right, getting into the final meta here. Old Umbria, of course, is the top faction closing out the year with a 60% win rate. At this point, with the last 3 months, we've seen Old Umbria with most of their models, and so that is reflected in this win rate. Zlanov obviously has become the poster child here, 62% win rate. Alicia at 104, 60% win rate. Reznikova is the odd duck in here. Reznikova was a choice list for a lot of WTC players and just isn't seeing the win rate of the rest of the faction. What's really scary when you think about it is if Reznikova wasn't seeing these 34 games, this win rate could really be higher than 60% if people weren't playing her. Infernal still at 59%, basically the place that they've been all year. Adaroth at 60% win rate. Still massive. Here we have Grimkin, been seeing a little bit more Grimkin recently. And then Storm Legion. Ignar is one of the biggest and best factions right now. And so keep an eye out for that as we close out the year. Huxley is their biggest played caster. Huxley at a 52% win rate. If you didn't catch my episode last week on if Warjacks are bad, check that one out. I kind of highlighted Huxley and how powerful the Warcaster is. And if the Warcaster is that good, but only 52% win rate, does that mean Warjacks are bad? Just a question to ask. Elder, obviously the dominant pair to Huxley at 94 games, 57% win rate. But don't overlook Kane Force sneaking in there with a 60% win rate. Coming down, we have Brineblood Marauders at a 53. They did not show up well at the WTC, but Brineblood's still a strong faction at 53. Gravediggers, again, getting better and better all year. I would expect anybody playing Gravediggers at this point in the season to have a very good feel for them and for them to be pretty scary. In general, this is the faction of Vargas. Vargas here with 163 games. This feels a little bit like a case of Horusk, and we'll see how Steamforged Games deals with Gravediggers in January. Probably Rangers that need to come down, and I wonder how much some of their Warcasters get looked at so that they are played a little bit more often instead of just being Vargas. Coming down and staying inside of the Mark IV factions, you have Necrofactorum down to 50%. Again, Crix has kind of had its fall from grace. Kytho's still a 58% win rate caster. Absolutely insane. The win rate that this caster still holds at 106 games played, clearly a bar above the rest of the faction at 58 over the 50. And then that statistic is brought down by what is a fairly even distribution in the casters, leaning more towards Aviserys a bit at a 47, but Kythos is still the Warcaster you have to worry about, in my opinion, and what the meta is mostly warped around. From there, we have Sea Raiders. Sea Raiders still in the faction of Horusk. Again, these numbers look a lot like Vargas. 150 games played, still a massive amount of games, but a win rate of only 51%, not carrying the faction quite as much. You see a little bit more even distribution of win rates inside of Sea Raiders, leaving them to be more balanced than I had initially thought. Shadowflame has continued its decline. They're down at 49%, where they used to be in the high to mid 50s. Obviously, this faction has a ton of options, but Sheerus being the dominant Warcaster only at a 51 is not pulling the faction up like a Kythos does at a 58 in Crix, kind of buoying the faction. I'm actually really curious to see what lists folks show up to lock and load with, as I think Kyrax and Nixian are two very upcoming choices. Dark Operations has obviously seen a significant amount of additional play as the army has been print to demand. I do think Dark Operations is much scarier than the 48% win rate here. Some of this might be drawn down a little bit by newer players playing with an army that they could just get into easy. and they're tremendously fun. The models are awesome. Dark Operations, super cool. I just would be leery of this actual win rate in the hands of a player that's been playing them a lot longer. Again, here, Kythos at 66%, still just the nuts, no matter what faction Kythos is being seed in. House Callus at 48%. I don't really think House Callus is making a dent on the meta at this point. Elith is probably the list that most people would think about, potentially with a double phantasm, and so something you might need to think about, as a meta call. But Helith only at 53% win rate, and it's significantly going downhill from there. And then bottom of our tier, as always, Kador is at 42%. Kador's been around the 44% mark, so in the last 3 months they've dropped off even farther. Baronova, kind of the one bright spot inside of the faction. Obviously, she has a tremendous feat, but I would say a lot of the models in Winter Court just not up to snuff right now, so they're not leaving a huge impact. That's it. I'm, again, very excited for Lock and Load. I think it's going to be a tremendous event. All the Steamforged Games folks are going to be there. We're going to get lots of announcements, new releases, future looks at model, keynotes, all that fun, really super exciting stuff. It's cool for them to have their own event that they can put on display and really show off. Looking back on 2025, I think Steamforged Game has done a wonderful job with the game. And so, again, I'm excited to see them improve this event that it used to be so important to me and a lot of Warmachine players with both Lock and Load and Warmachine Weekend. All right, everyone. Thanks for watching. Please like and subscribe. Until next time.